What influences the program design? So if we're developing training or we're planning a learning course of some kind, we need to be aware of all of the different influences, all of the different factors that we need to be aware of before and as we build our course to make sure that it's going to work the most effectively for our students to get the results that it is that they're after. So there are a number of considerations we have to make, and this list is by no means exhaustive, but are some of the primary things you need to consider. So if you're delivering an accredited course, then obviously the primary consideration you need to make, the number one influence of your program design is going to be the requirements of that accreditation. If you're following a specified training package or licensed content, then you must be making sure that you're following the guidelines, the criteria, and the requirements, conditions, and compliance standards of that training package or qualification package that you're following. That will form the fundamentals of your training program itself, how it's going to be delivered, the duration, and a whole other host of different requirements that are going to impact the way that course is actually designed. We then have the skill or competence level that you're teaching to. That's also going to influence the way you design the program. Now, for some courses, for instance, you might just be delivering information and knowledge. So that might be a lot more straightforward, a lot faster, a lot easier to deliver in just videos or self-paced type learning than if you had a course that was much more focused on practical implementation of certain kinds of technical skills. That would mean perhaps that you would need equipment and resources, a physical location. Perhaps you would need certain safety procedures and equipment in place, and it would take considerable number of hours, even specifically logged time, in order to practice that skill. You know, as an example, in the mining industry, for instance, if someone's practicing using a certain piece of equipment or machinery, then they may actually be required to have a certain numbers of hours in a practice environment driving a piece of mobile plant, for instance, before they're actually allowed out into the workplace as a competent operator of that piece of equipment. So you can see how that really would affect the way that we're designing our program. Now, the next one we have here are making sure we're thinking about the standard operating procedures of a particular task. So if we're teaching people how to, for instance, conduct tasks in the workplace or with equipment, again, for instance, that equipment may come with special procedures or operating processes that have to be followed when conducting that or using that equipment safely. So our training program would be built around the manual of that operating manual, for instance. So you can see here again how being aware of what the student is going to have to be able to do, to what level and what standard, and with what equipment, then will obviously affect the way that we're going to design and deliver the training itself too. We also may have things like regulatory requirements or licensing requirements. Obviously, laws and legislation come in for a whole host of reasons, not just the environment that we're in, perhaps the industry that we're training in, or indeed the types of tasks that the student is going to have to go on and perform. They can all influence as well. If we're delivering something that's attached to some kind of license, for instance, then clearly we're going to have to make sure that we design our training around the requirements, the performance criteria and the standards of that particular license. And it may also be things like the individual needs of the student. So what's the previous experience or knowledge or skill level of your particular audience? So if you've got an audience that are rather low level in terms of their ability to read and write and articulate, clearly that's going to significantly influence the way that you'd write the program compared to if you had a highly academic group of learners. So they're just some considerations you need to make when it comes to understanding what different things are going to be impacting the way that you're going to design and deliver your training.